Welcome everybody to Meditation Mount. This is the first of our monthly global gatherings around the time of the new moon. And I welcome you from all parts of the world. So we're a number of people on this call. And the first thing that we need to do is welcome each other by creating a shared space. So I'd like to have us do a brief alignment to bring ourselves into a focused and coherent field. And the way I'd like to do that is using a mantra that is well loved here at Meditation Mount. It's called the mantra of the self. So let's begin by going inside and finding that still place. Releasing any tensions that may be held in the physical body. Breathing out any tensions that we may have in our emotional body. And then letting go of any extraneous thoughts so that our mind is clear. And standing inside this place, we affirm, more radiant than the sun, purer than the snow, subtler than the ether is the self, the spirit within my heart. I am that self am I. We are that self are we. And as we stand in our own center, we are immediately in resonant relationship with the centers of all beings present. So taking a few more gentle breaths. Realize this affirmation of the self, the truth of who we are. Thank you. So this is not a traditional presentation, but it's more of a meditative exploration. I'll be sharing some of the work that we do from Meditation Mount and also how it applies to what's happening in the world at the moment. I'll be using a couple of illustrations, a couple of slides to help us understand some of the principles and pathways that we'll be speaking about. And then we'll close with a meditation. And we also have a chat function here, as probably many of you know who have been on Zoom before. And so this is a place where we can ask questions, make comments, send messages to each other. As I say, this is an experiment. This is our first time. And so we're looking at how do we create a space in which we can inquire the way together. So there are times in the pageant of human history and human evolution when we encounter auspicious dates. And this weekend is one of those times. It's a special time of convergence and opportunity. We have the solstice. Here in the northern hemisphere, it is the summer solstice. In the southern hemisphere, it is the winter solstice. We have the new moon. We have an eclipse. And we've just moved from the sign Gemini to the sun sign Cancer. And my astrologer friends tell me that it is also a momentous time at a cosmic level. and that the earth is actually at a crossroads, at a point in a cosmic cross where two ellipses meet that happens every 26,000 years. So it's as though these are special times, and we can sense that. One of the things that happens when you pass from one thing to another is there's a space in the middle. And that space is a time for breath, where we pause, we receive, and we can penetrate deeper into something. So it's the space between the breaths that allow us to do the deep reflection. And so the conditions are right for us to explore deeply some of the issues in front of us as a society, and also the call that many of us are feeling to build a new world. How do we build it? Upon what foundations? So those are the things we'll be exploring. I do believe that all of us over the past number of months have sensed in our hearts, this is definitely the end of one era and the beginning of another. There's no going back to an old normal. We have the choice to go forward and create a new normal, a new future together. And that's really the motto of the sun sign Cancer, says, I build a lighted house and therein dwell. I believe that we're not just talking individually now, but we're talking about we as one humanity. We are building a lighted planetary house and therein dwell. And the dweller inside that house, or the resident, would be our better angels. It would be our soul. It's a lighted house because we occupy it as an enlightened being. So how do we reach enlightenment, and how do we build this lighted house together? I think many of us understand that our present society is built on shifting sands of self-interest, competition, and that's no foundation. About 3 weeks ago, Spike Lee was interviewed by the BBC, and he was asked, is what is happening in America right now any surprise to you? And he said, if you build a house on the foundations of hatred, divisiveness, and self-interest, it will eventually crumble. So he was just making a statement of fact. So the question is, how do we build a new society on the bedrock of some spiritual values and principles without it becoming dogmatic, without it becoming an imposition? One of the core, let's say, tasks or assignments of Meditation Mount is to work with what we call the laws or pathways and spiritual principles of the soul. And I'd very much like to explore that with you. And so we're going to go and look at one of these slides, and we'll go through it in a reflective way. So here you have two triangles. The golden triangle is the triangle of three principles, which we will be exploring today: essential divinity, goodwill, and unanimity. And the accompanying pathways or laws are group endeavor, right human relations, and spiritual approach. Traditionally, they've been called the laws, like the law of group endeavor, the law of spiritual approach. We found at Meditation Mount that using that word didn't go down well with everybody. They didn't quite understand it. There was some resistance. So we said, why not call it a pathway or a practice? So we'll be understanding how the principle of essential divinity is entered into through the pathway of spiritual approach. So let's focus first on essential divinity. What does it mean? If we reflect on the quote from the Bhagavad Gita that may be familiar to many of us. Having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, yet I remain. So this is the one life being inside everything. So if we look at goodwill, and if we look at unanimity, this triangle of principles is that bedrock that I spoke about earlier. But let's begin with essential divinity. Another way of looking at the quote from the Bhagavad Gita, having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, yet I remain, is to say, well, that means I'm a fractal of the one life. And so one of the affirmations that I use each day is, I am a sacred fractal of the one life. So this is not just a concept. This is understanding that inside of in my heart, there is this spark that is part of the one flame. And this is the same spark that lives inside all planets, all people, all particles. It's the spark of life that exists in everything. So if we were to just silently go back into that center that we touched in our alignment and realize inside our heart there is the eternal flame of our own sovereignty, our own self burning, and it's called the fire of love, the fire of spirit. About 7 years ago, I was reflecting on the principle of essential divinity. And I wrote this little piece after I had some insights. And I'd like to read it to you because it attempts to capture the one and the many. And in fact, it's called The Dance of the One and the Many. The one slumbered through the cosmic night in a state of unknowing and dreamlike amorphous unity. The I am sensed but did not know itself. And with the dawn of a new cosmic day, it stirred and stretched and dreamily imagined infinite possibilities as the desire to be burned deep within its heart. Then, through an act of will, the one fractured itself into 1,000,000 pieces and sent them on their way into the fields of time and space as pilgrims on a journey of self-discovery. Having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. Over time, the separated parts awoke. They looked around and beheld others, never realizing the true nature of this other. Inside the encapsulation of the separated self, each aspect experienced the power of the isolated I. Through a series of relationships with that which lay outside, an identity of a me and you was born. With faltering steps, the I am that made its painful and persistent progress along the path. The long journey of ceaseless striving for humanity as the prodigal son had now begun in earnest. Deep within the heart of the separated self, a cry for wholeness welled up and issued forth. Slowly, the parts began to see themselves in each other until an understanding dawned within the consciousness of the fractured body of humanity that there is no other. there is only the one soul. Imagine the euphoria of this spiritual homecoming, coursing through the group field as the soul whispers in our inner ear, there is no inside or outside, no me or you, no above or below for the mind to grasp. There is only a sublime state of at-oneness, suffused with joy and permeated with a profound and fiery love that knows no bounds. So the mystery of being registers and awakens in the human heart through a deep co-resonant communion with that presence we call a greater love, the heart of hearts, dwelling within each human heart as the seed and promise of our true self. Then finally, when the day has come, the I am that I am will emerge as the one who knows itself as one with itself, a result of all the probations, trials, and weary steps taken throughout the ages upon the long and thorny path of self-realization. The secret of this ultimate reunion is hidden in the words, synthesis is, but unity must be created. So lives within lives, wheels within wheels, journeys within journeys, all in constant communication and co-creative communion. Everything is a sacred fractal of the one life. Everything is essentially divine. So that is an attempt to encapsulate what I was sensing and what each of us sense when we realize that we have our own individual sovereignty, and yet we are part of something greater. So let's go back and look at the triangle and look at the principle of goodwill. What is goodwill? It's been said that the natural urge of the soul is to love and serve. So goodwill really is the power of love within our human experience. So once again, if we just quietly re-enter the space of our own heart, and we can still leave the triangle image up. And the flame that burns in the center of our being is the fire of love. And then just notice how with each breath, this flame grows brighter, stronger, more radiant. And how love increases and suffuses our body with its blessing. So we see, when we look at the principle of goodwill, we see across the law of right human relations, or the path of right human relations. And we'll come back to this slide again when we focus on unanimity, but let's just mention right human relations now. Right human relations is more than just good relations between people. It's right human relations with all aspects of life, all the realms of nature, both visible and invisible, the rocks, the plants, the birds, the animals, the angels, the subtle realms of energies, whatever is part of our reality. It's being in right relationship with everything. And what we've seen recently in the last number of months is the shadow of our humanness surface. And that shadow has shown us that we do not have love flowing and respect flowing for all of our fellow human beings. Each of us has been deeply touched by the deaths that have occurred. And the whole Black Lives Matter movement, for me, it goes much deeper than that, because it's all about all lives matter, not just human lives, but all lives, because there is one life and we're part of it. And why would we do harm to something of which we are a part and in which we live and move and have our being? The importance of establishing right human relations with the whole sacred ecosystem of Gaia, including the humans, is so that we bring ourselves back into this ecosystem as a living player, as a living participant. And this is where the principle of unanimity comes in. So let's go back and look at unanimity. Unanimity says there is one coherent, loving, purposeful presence we call the One Life. And today, we began a 2-month period of reflection on unanimity. And in a moment, I'll show you another slide with the rhythms of the year of when we meditate on the different pathways and principles. But at the moment, let's focus on unanimity. One of the phrases that I read just now was, synthesis is that unity must be created. So we could say that unanimity is like a pre-existing, purposeful, loving, coherent field where everything is in relationship with everything. Now that's the principle. And yet, even though I can feel it in my bones to be true, I'm not yet living it. I, Michael, am not yet a coherent field walking around on this planet. I'm doing my best. We're all doing our best. And so what the pathway does, it says that group endeavor is the path to take to discover unanimity. So the law of group endeavor means working together towards a common goal, accepting and celebrating our differences. As we create a field of unity together, it reaches a point where it starts to vibrate with the principle of unanimity. And as we know, when things are in resonance, there is no distance and no time. We are instantaneously at one with it. So for us to deeply experience and embody the principle of unanimity requires that we go about our work together, working for the common good. And towards the end of the session together, we're going to have a meditation focused on unanimity because, as many of you know, we have just begun World Unity Week. And so our contribution to World Unity Week will be to focus on the principle of unanimity and send those blessings into an emerging unified field of our humanness. So let's just take a pause now. and just take stock of why we're presenting the principles and pathways. As you know, there's much that we have to put right in our world, much that is unjust. And so our work is to redeem the errors and omissions and the mistakes of the past. And yet, if something is going to be different, we have to create a future built on a higher set of values and principles. And so our work at Meditation Mount is to promote these spiritual principles and pathways and saying, look, if we were to agree that everything is essentially divine, you, me, the trees, the rocks, the plants, everything that is part of our planet itself is a spiritual being. How would that change our lives? How would we behave differently if we were to agree on that? Now, there may be times we lapse, but to have that as an organizing principle. And then the other organizing principle is that of goodwill, where the natural urge is to allow love to flow. And then the third principle, unanimity. If we knew that everything was part of the web of life, how could we ever harm ourselves? By harming others, we harm ourselves. By harming ourselves, we harm others. And we disturb this coherent field that is the one life. So the idea of promoting these principles and the pathways towards them is so that we can start to build now the new society, the new civilization, the new world culture, whatever we want to call it, that will probably take hundreds of years to build. But it needs to be built on solid foundation, on a solid bedrock. And so a lot of things have to change. Our whole economic structure, our political structure, everything will have to shift if it's going to reflect these principles. So how does competition and self-interest express a principle of unanimity, goodwill, or essential divinity? It's not that anything is wrong, it's just that we are asked to build a lighted house and therein dwell. And the lighted house is to be built with those principles that are the principles of the soul. So 3 words come to mind when I think of that. First of all, we have to dare to do it. So daring is one. One of the characteristics of this new world that I believe we want to create is one of caring. And the third word is sharing. So daring, caring, and sharing are ways to sort of prime the pump and get ourselves moving. So doing the work of social activism is incredibly important, and doing it from a place of the spiritual warrior where we stand at a center that only holds love. We stand at a center that only sees coherence, and we stand at a center where we only recognize the sovereignty and the divinity in each other. That, for me, is how we can be more effective as social activists, or subtle activists, as it's also being called. So this may be a good time to look at the final slide, to look at the cycle. And you see here the principles and pathways inside this wheel. And imagine this wheel with these 6 spokes rolling through the year. And as it rolls through the year, part of it is touching the earth. So the point here is that all the principles and pathways are always present. It's just that every 2 months, as we cycle through and the wheel moves, we focus on a different one. And today starts the 2-month period when we're meditating on unanimity. And in fact, the boulder, the sandstone boulder behind me, has the word unanimity engraved on it. Because at Meditation Mount, we have a global garden of peace, and that looks out over the Ojai Valley. And these principles and pathways are engraved in sandstone boulders so that we can meditate and take in the presence of these principles, not just as mental concepts, but as living realities. And we can stand in front of essential divinity and say, what does it mean for me to admit, to affirm, and to comport myself as essentially divine? Whoa, maybe I need a little upgrade. What are we going to do about that reality, Michael? And then we have choices of how to make adjustments in our life. So what we offer when it's time to come back to Meditation Mount, unfortunately, we're still closed because of the COVID-19 restrictions. When it is time for you to come back, you'll be able to go into the garden and go through this journey of self-discovery and cultivate your own inner garden of the soul. For now, we're doing that in a virtual garden together. So here you see, starting June 21st, we had the principle of unanimity. And then the law of spiritual approach, August the 21st, principle of essential divinity, October the 21st, right human relations, December the 21st, principle of goodwill, February the 21st, and the law of group endeavor, April the 21st. So what we do and what we'll do in subsequent monthly meetings and gatherings is to take one of these principles and pathways and actually do some work using creative meditation. And I'll go into that a little later of what that means. But just for now, I want to make sure that we understand that essential divinity is the principle. And the path that leads into essential divinity is spiritual approach. Now, spiritual approach could be a scientific approach. It could be psychological. It could be religious. It could be artistic. Whatever it is, it's a path of self-discovery into our own nature. It's where we discover who we are, not somebody else tells us who we are. So even though I'm offering some of these guidelines, they're not meant to be taken as the truth. They're simply offered as pathways that we can take to discover who we are from the inside. Because it's only when we have that aha moment does it register inside us as a reality. A number of you I know have read the Blue books, the Alice Bailey books, and the Tibetan says, look, if you don't agree with anything that's written, it's okay, just leave it, walk away, it doesn't matter. If you are in resonance with it, try it out, live it, study it, ponder it. And I offer that in the same spirit of what we're offering now is field notes from Meditation Mount. What we've discovered so far works, what our mission is in the world. And then when we look at goodwill, just to connect goodwill, right human relations is the pathway to goodwill. And then finally, unanimity, our pathway into unanimity is through the law of group endeavor. Because we can't do it by ourselves anymore. We're not isolated units. And I know a lot of people have said, well, I'm not sure if I want to give up my I. You know, I know I'm not perfect, but you know, I've lived with this Michael or whatever, this Sarah for many years, and I'm okay with it. And what I reassure people, I said, look, moving from the I to the we, it does not indicate or forebode a loss of our individuality. All that happens as we move from I to we is that we gain an expanded sense of self. So the essential divinity that I am actually expands. I become a larger I until we become we together. And each one of us, as somebody has just written, we're each on an individual journey. And we each have our own lessons. We each go through these classrooms, and yet it's the same school. It's the school of earth. And each of us, through a combination of dharma and karma, are placed in different schools, in different classrooms within the school. And so that's why, for me, it's important that we understand when somebody's going through a hard time, it's their lesson, we support them. And when somebody's doing good work, we support them, because what they're doing is expressing the gift of their soul, or attempting to create a vehicle that can be an even greater expression for the gift of their soul. So one of the things that we are beginning to understand is that community is really important. And so if we could just come out of the graphic now. One of the phrases that Martin Luther King used that has been with me for many years is beloved community. I guess it's the same thing. At Meditation Mount, we're saying a new civilization based on these principles and pathways. They really do constitute a beloved community where we are together loved, where we honor the beloved in each of us, and where we are community. That's unanimity, that's goodwill, and that's essential divinity. So we could also just as easily say, at Meditation Mount, we're here to promote the building of beloved community. So let me just see if there's anything on the chat. This is, as I say, this is a new experience, and we're learning. So let me read what somebody says. The divine self is always present in every point, in every self, in all of time and space, in everyone in the world. We are each on an individual journey of discovering ourselves. Goodwill is already present in our soul. It is learning how to express it in all our relations. And that's from Santana and Matthew. Thank you. That's exactly it. We don't have to go out and find it. The journey of self-discovery is a journey of revelation. So we could think of ourselves as these divine seeds. And that's like a principle. And I can run around and say, I'm divine, and just holding up the seeds. And somebody says, I don't see your divinity in expression. So what we have to do, I believe, as these divine seeds, we're planted on earth. We have to grow, we have to be nourished. And the nutrients that we need to grow in are love, respect. All the things that we know are missing in parts of the world at the moment that we are so earnestly seeking to reestablish in the psychic soil of our humanity. So this is, in one respect, a very simple journey. Once we wake up and realize that we're on the same journey, although it looks different and we meet different people, but we're headed towards the same goal. Teilhard de Chardin said that everything that ascends converges. So as we ascend in our aspirations to build this preferred future, we will converge. We already are. And in the last 2 weeks, I think a number of us have sensed that our human family is becoming closer. And also, the divisions in our human family are becoming clearer. And there's a choice point we're at, a crossroads. What kind of world do we want? What kind of world do we choose to create? And our contribution to this deep dialogue from Meditation Mount is to say, we offer the principles and pathways as a way of looking at a solid foundation upon which to build this beloved community of the future. So maybe if we just pause for a moment and each of us reflect, what am I being called to in this new era? If this truly is the beginning of something new and we've left the old behind, the old normal, although there will be remnants of it until we've truly redeemed it and created something new, what is it that we're being called to build together? What's our part in this great reconstruction or the reimagination of the world? Maybe we've already sensed something and are following that calling. Maybe we need to spend more time in the silence of the heart to listen to the still small voice that calls, that knows the direction, that knows the way. Just as Santana and Matthew said, goodwill is always present in our soul. So is our destiny. So it's a constant process of revelation. Waking up each day and being in our own small way an avatar of loving kindness wherever we go. There are great avatars in the world, so we could practice on a small scale, at an individual level, of just going about and saying, hey, I'm an not to others, because that could be a little presumptuous, but saying to ourselves, today and every other day, I am an avatar of loving kindness, or whatever quality you want to bring in the world. Just play with it. Because the other thing is that the situation in the world has created such a heaviness, there's such pain, and we have to move through this pain. And yet we know that one of the qualities of the soul is joy, levity. And so lightheartedness doesn't mean we don't take life seriously. I would call it, instead of lightheartedness, I would call it heart-lightedness. So when the hearts are light, we are joyful, and we naturally spread the gifts of the soul. We spread the love that's already there. So our task is, if we were to use the phrase, that a biblical phrase, collectively to make the word flesh. And if the word is love, how do we live it each day? And if the word is peace, how do we bring peace into our own warring parts of ourselves? The different voices that strive for attention and strive for dominance. When I'm thinking of peace, I'm thinking of, well, we ask the nations to disarm. At the moment, there's a big push for nuclear disarmament. And I have to look inside myself and say, am I armed? Do I still have jagged edges that cause harm to others when I'm roused and not totally in control? So I believe that we're being asked in all of these instances to start with ourselves, individuals, to start with ourselves as groups, and so simply to practice. And when you practice, eventually, it becomes alive. Roberto Assagioli, who was the inspiration behind the centers like Meditation Mount, was the founder of psychosynthesis. And he was also a student of the Tibetan that many of you read about in the Alice Bailey books. And he was very clear about joy. And his work was synthesis, not just the synthesis of the psyche, but the synthesis of nations, which is the drive towards unanimity. So this whole presence of synthesis is calling us together and calling us to meet and serve a higher common purpose. So there's a lot to reflect on. And what I'd like to do as a way of just breathing and closing out today, because as I say, this is an experiment. and we'd love your input to know how we proceed in the future. We plan to meet around the new moon every month. And next month, we're planning to meet on Sunday, I think it's Sunday, July the 19th. And as an experiment, we're going to start at 1 o'clock Pacific time, because we've had several requests from friends in Europe and Australia and New Zealand. And they say, look, if I stay up a little late, these are the people in Europe, and our friends in Australasia say, look, if I get up early, I can make it if there's this sweet spot. The sweet spot is 1 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. So we'll send out notices about that, but I just want to let you know that we'd like to establish this as a regular rhythm. So there's a lot to digest, a lot's happening in the world. So how do we stand in our own sovereignty, in our own center? How do we stand together? How do we right the wrongs? And how do we start to build a society on entirely new principles? But the forms that emerge from these principles may look so different from what we see today. So we have to dare to step into the unknown. But at one level, it isn't unknown. It's simply the unrevealed and the unrealized. It's always present. So as World Unity Week began 2 days ago, let's join in this great global movement, and let us complete our time together with a meditation on unanimity that is our contribution to World Unity Week. So if you'd just like to take a few deep breaths to once again exhale any tensions that may have built up, and inhale a sense of total relaxation in the physical body. And likewise with the emotional body. Breathe out any tensions, any disturbances. And breathe in a sense of calm. Now breathing out, allow the mind to empty itself. And breathe in the spirit of serenity. And stand again in that deep center of your own heart, where the fire of love burns brightly. And then send out a strand of lighted, loving energy from your heart, a radiant beam to touch the hearts of all gathered together on this call. Sense our coherence. And send out these beams of lighted love to family, friends, colleagues. Extend it across the world to all peoples. And to all the cultural colors of our human rainbow. And sense one humanity beating as one heart, breathing as one soul. Now visualize the group field that has been created by our coming together as a golden chalice. And we raise that chalice and we call upon the presence of unanimity to fill it with its grace. And whatever we receive, we offer in blessing. So with this golden chalice raised, full of the blessings that we have received, let us pour out blessings of unity, of communion, of mutual respect from our chalice. See them flowing out into the world, golden streams touching each heart and each mind, connecting all beings, human and all inhabitants of all other realms, visible and invisible. And we know that unanimity is a reality that simply needs to be revealed through all that we think, say, and do. And this chalice continuously receives and gives. A chalice has a twofold function, receiving and giving. And when these two actions happen simultaneously, we have flow. The flow of love through us into the world. And we participate in the great chain of blessing. So let us see ourselves gathered today as part of that great chain of blessing, sending our love into the world. And know that each day we are given the opportunity to show up as an avatar of loving kindness, a homeopathic dose of goodness inside the one body of our human family. And we declare that we are one family. And as we sense our unity with all life, we can also declare, as part of the sacred ecosystem of Gaia, that we are Gaians. So let us hold Gaia in our heart, knowing that unanimity lives inside our heart, and we are held inside the heart of unanimity. And just take a few moments to feel this communion with life flood through your mind, bringing new insights, new ideas. Allow this sense of oneness to flood into your emotional body, bringing healing and joy. And allow this realization of our unity to enter the very blood and bones and atoms of our incarnated body, giving it strength, resilience, and the power to serve the common good as the hands and feet of the soul. So we're one of many, many hundreds of different groups around the world are meeting, focusing on unity. And so it seemed absolutely fitting that the principle of unanimity would begin its 2-month period today. So thank you everyone for joining us. We will meet in 1 month's time. We will send out notices, and the world will be changing as we roll through this year, month by month, and we will be part of the change. We will be part of the writing of the new story, and we will be changed. So, in the time-honored greeting that salutes the divinity in you, I say 2 words: Namaste, Namaskar. And we'll see you all next month.